You're watching the novel flow. Now,
Beloved for over a century, A Little Princess tells the journey of a young girl whose imagination shielded her from sorrow and whose kindness changed everyone around her. Let us begin her story. On a cold gray morning in London, a little girl stepped into a world she had never seen before. Her name was Sara Crewe, and though she carried the manners of a princess, she did not yet know how much her heart would be tested. Store for complete details and restrictions. London fog curled like pale smoke over the cobblestone street as the carriage rattled forward, its wheels slicing through puddles that reflected the dim gray sky. Inside, a small girl sat very still, hands folded neatly over her lap. Her dark eyes, deep and shining, full of an old kind of wisdom, watched the city with a quiet intensity. This was Sara Crewe, 7 years old, traveling farther from home than she had ever imagined. She wore a rich velvet coat trimmed with soft fur, a tiny gold locket around her neck, and a thoughtful expression that made people look twice. Her face was delicate, framed by soft dark hair tied with a satin ribbon. She hardly blinked as the carriage rolled past groups of workers unloading crates, shopkeepers sweeping their stoops, chimney smoke lifting into the damp winter air. Everything looked enormous, mysterious, and heavy with secrets. Sara had grown up in India, under blinding sun, fragrant breezes, and the steady presence of her beloved father, Captain Crewe. But now she was in London, a land colder, darker, and completely unknown. Yet she sat with calm dignity, as if she already understood that life was full of passages one must cross bravely, even when the path was covered in fog. Captain Crewe sat beside her, pretending to be cheerful, though his eyes betrayed a deep sadness. He loved Sara more fiercely than anything else on earth, and bringing her so far from him felt like a wound. "My little Sara," he said softly, brushing a curl from her forehead, "this school is one of the best in all of London. You'll have good friends, books, comforts, everything you need." Sara nodded gently, though her heart tightened. "I know, Papa, and I'll write to you every day." Her voice was calm, but her fingers tightened on the edge of her coat. The carriage turned onto a street lined with tall brick houses, iron gates, and bare winter trees whose branches scratched at the sky like thin fingers. A black sign came into view: Miss Minchin's Select Seminary for Young Ladies. The school looked impressive, almost intimidating: tall windows, sweeping steps, and a door polished to a glossy shine. The carriage slowed, then stopped with a final shudder. Captain Crewe helped Sara down. The cold wind rushed around her, nipping her cheeks pink. She looked up at the building, grand, strict, and strangely silent. Somewhere inside, she knew, would be her new room, her new teachers, her new life. She held her father's hand tightly. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of old books, chalk, and polished wood. Portraits stared down from the walls, stern, respectable faces of people who once lived in the same world Sara was about to enter. Then Miss Minchin appeared. Tall, stiff, and sharply dressed in black silk, she walked with the authority of someone who believed she was more important than everyone else. Her thin lips curved into a smile that never reached her eyes. "Captain Crewe," she said, her voice sweet but cold, "and this must be Miss Sara Crewe?" Sara curtsied politely. "How do you do, ma'am?" Miss Minchin's eyes traveled over Sara's fine clothes, her delicate appearance, her rich coat, and the beautifully crafted doll she carried in one arm. Emily, with porcelain cheeks and glass eyes that seemed almost alive. "A very fortunate child," Miss Minchin murmured. Captain Crewe cleared his throat. "I want my daughter to have every advantage, spare no expense, treat her as—" "We shall treat her as a princess," Miss Minchin said smoothly. Sara's face softened a little. She didn't think of herself as a princess, but she was used to being spoken to kindly back home. The words reminded her of stories, fairy tales she read in the warm Indian nights filled with magic, courage, and hidden kingdoms. Miss Minchin escorted them upstairs to Sara's room. It was large and well lit, with a fireplace, a neat bed, and a window overlooking the street. Sara walked slowly across the carpet, imagining the life she would now build in this strange new place. She placed Emily on the pillow and smoothed her dress tenderly. Captain Crewe watched her, trying to memorize every detail: her quiet grace, her thoughtful way of touching things, her gentle movements. His heart felt unbearably heavy. "Sara," he whispered, "you will be brave, won't you?" She turned and wrapped her arms around his waist. "I will, Papa. I promise." They held each other for a long moment. Then Miss Minchin cleared her throat. "Captain Crewe, your carriage is waiting." Sara's breath caught. She knew this moment was coming, but knowing didn't soften the blow. Captain Crewe kneeled and cupped her face in his hands. "You are my little treasure," he whispered. "And you are my whole world," she answered. He kissed her forehead, stood up slowly as if his legs refused to carry him, then walked toward the door. Sara followed until the threshold, where she stopped, clutching the sides of her coat. "Goodbye, my Sara." "Goodbye, Papa." He disappeared down the stairs. Sara didn't move until the front door slammed shut and the wheels of the carriage rolled away, growing quieter and quieter until she could no longer hear them. Miss Minchin placed a firm hand on Sara's shoulder. "You must join the other girls now." Sara blinked away the tears. She had promised her father she would be brave, so she lifted her chin and walked forward. The classroom was filled with girls of different ages. Some whispered and stared at the new pupil with curiosity. Others glanced at her expensive clothes and immediately assumed she must be spoiled. A girl with wide blue eyes and soft curls, Ermengarde St. John, looked at Sara with open admiration. Another girl, fat, rosy, and innocent, Lottie, watched her with childish awe. In the corner, a thin servant girl with tired eyes, Becky, paused in her duties, struck by the newcomer's calmness. Sara introduced herself politely, and though the other girls were unsure what to make of her, they felt something unusual about her. Her voice, her expressions, even the way she held Emily, all carried a depth that made her seem older than her age. Miss Minchin began the lessons. Sara listened carefully, answering questions with quiet brilliance. She could speak French as fluently as English, could read long passages with perfect memory, and could describe places she had seen in India with an almost magical touch. Whispers filled the room. "She's clever. She's rich. She's like a princess." Sara heard none of it. Her mind drifted to her father's ship, moving farther and farther away. She felt a sharp ache, but she breathed in slowly and reminded herself, "I must be strong." At lunch, she sat alone until Ermengarde timidly approached. "Would you like to sit with me?" Sara smiled warmly. "Yes, I would." Ermengarde wasn't clever, nor confident, nor admired by the other girls, but to Sara that didn't matter. She valued kindness above all else, and so a gentle friendship began, one that would weave itself through the loneliness of her new life. Later that afternoon, when the sky darkened and gas lamps flickered to life, Sara climbed into her new room and opened her locket. Inside was a tiny portrait of Captain Crewe. She touched it softly. "Good night, Papa," she whispered, even though the world outside had just turned evening. She sat on her bed, Emily beside her, and began telling the doll a story. A grand story about a brave girl who traveled far from home, but kept her heart shining like a lantern even in the darkest places. As she spoke, the room seemed warmer, the shadows softened, and Sara's loneliness eased a little. Stories were her magic, her way of lighting the world from within. Below her room, Miss Minchin watched the warm glow under Sara's door with narrowed eyes. "A princess indeed," she muttered. "Let us hope she remains obedient." But if there was anything Sara Crewe carried in her small heart, it was not obedience. It was imagination, courage, and the quiet strength of someone who believed kindness could shape the world. And so thus, on her first night in London, the little girl with a storyteller's soul whispered tales into the cold winter air, unaware of the storms that would soon rise, or the hardships waiting to test her spirit. For now, she was simply a little princess in a strange land, trying her best to be brave. Life at Miss Minchin's school. The carriage rattled over the cobblestones as Sara Crewe arrived at the door of Miss Minchin's Select Seminary for Young Ladies. Though the London air carried a brisk chill, the excitement that danced in Sara's heart seemed to warm her from within. She had left India behind, with its golden sun and fragrant gardens, but now London held a new kind of promise, one that sparkled in the gaslit streets, in the uniforms of passing children, and in the polished windows of grand houses. Sara's wide eyes drank in the view of the school. It was a tall, narrow building, its facade strict and somber, all sharp lines and muted colors. A heavy wooden door with brass fittings marked the entrance, and above it, in small gilded letters, the name Miss Minchin's Seminary for Young Ladies announced itself with a kind of austere pride. Sara stepped out of the carriage, clutching her small, well-packed trunk. Her dark eyes met the sharp gaze of a stern woman standing by the door, and Sara, ever polite and fearless, smiled warmly. "Miss Minchin?" she asked, her voice clear and confident. "I'm Sara Crewe. My father—" Miss Minchin did not smile. Instead, she fixed Sara with a thin-lipped expression that seemed both calculating and critical. "Ah, yes, you are expected. Come in, child," she said, her voice brisk, almost slicing through the cold morning air. Her eyes flicked over Sara as though measuring her worth and potential, as if she were a delicate piece of china. Sara's wide eyes drank in the view of the school. It was a tall, narrow building, its facade strict and somber, all sharp lines and muted colors. A heavy wooden door with brass fittings marked the entrance, and above it, in small gilded letters, the name Miss Minchin's Seminary for Young Ladies announced itself with a kind of austere pride. Sara stepped out of the carriage, clutching her small, well-packed trunk. Her dark eyes met the sharp gaze of a stern woman standing by the door, and Sara, ever polite and fearless, smiled warmly. "Miss Minchin?" she asked, her voice clear and confident. "I'm Sara Crewe. My father—" Miss Minchin did not smile. Instead, she fixed Sara with a thin-lipped expression that seemed both calculating and critical. "Ah, yes, you are expected. Come in, child," she said, her voice brisk, almost slicing through the cold morning air. Her eyes flicked over Sara as though measuring her worth and potential, as if she were a delicate piece of china. Sara stepped inside, marveling at the high-ceilinged hall. The floors shone with a careful polish, reflecting the soft light of tall windows. A large staircase spiraled upward, and portraits of young girls in stiff gowns seemed to watch every newcomer with an air of silent judgment. The air smelled faintly of wax, lavender, and something faintly sour, perhaps the result of many years of careful cleaning mixed with the quiet melancholy of disciplined confinement. "Your room is upstairs," Miss Minchin said, gesturing toward the staircase. "You will follow my rules, attend lessons promptly, and behave as a lady. We expect nothing less." She paused, her thin eyes narrowing. "I understand your father is a wealthy man. That will suffice, but wealth does not excuse poor manners." Sara nodded eagerly, her mind alive with thoughts of friendship, learning, and the adventures she might have within these walls. She followed the housemaid up the stairs to a small but neat room that would be hers. The walls were painted a soft cream, and a small window overlooked the garden courtyard. A narrow bed with a lace-edged coverlet stood against one wall, a tiny writing desk beneath the window, and a wardrobe awaited the careful placement of her clothes. Everything was clean, orderly, and poised for a young girl to make it her own. Sara unpacked slowly, arranging her belongings just so, her fingers lingering over a small doll she had brought from India. She sat for a moment, gazing out the window at the courtyard below. A few girls were already at play, their voices ringing in the crisp air, full of laughter and occasional shrill scolding. Sara felt a twinge of longing. Though she had been a child of privilege in India, she had lived largely alone, attended by her devoted maid and guided by her father's gentle hand. Here, she would have to learn the ways of school life, of rules and routines, of friendships and rivalries. But Sara was no ordinary child. Her imagination, her wit, and her courage had already seen her through many challenges. She would not falter now. By afternoon, Sara was led to the schoolroom. The room was long, with high windows, rows of desks, and a teacher's platform at the front. The walls were lined with shelves of books, some neatly bound in leather, others worn and soft from repeated reading. The smell of ink and paper mingled with the faint scent of polished wood. Girls sat quietly at their desks, some reading, others practicing penmanship, their hands moving in elegant curves. Sara's heart leapt with delight. This was a place of learning, of stories, and of possibility. Miss Minchin's sister, Miss Amelia, a rounder, gentler woman, introduced Sara to the class. "Girls, this is Sara Crewe. She comes from India. I hope you will all make her welcome." There was polite applause, but Sara could sense the undercurrents of curiosity and perhaps subtle envy. Some girls' eyes lingered a little too long on the fine materials of her clothing, the delicate lace, and the shimmer of her jewelry. Others whispered among themselves, casting sideways glances, measuring Sara's manners, her grace, and her dignity. Sara, however, met each remark with calm dignity, her mind racing with clever, polite responses that neither lowered her status nor inflamed the situation. Her manners were impeccable, and even Lavinia could not truly undermine her poise. The friendships Sara formed were delicate and tentative at first. Ermengarde, a timid girl with a round, soft face and wide eyes, found immediate comfort in Sara's kindness. She encouraged her, praised her efforts, and shared small delights. A story from India, a sketch of a garden she had imagined, a witty remark that made Ermengarde laugh despite herself. Slowly, Ermengarde blossomed under Sara's encouragement, and the two became inseparable during the quiet moments of study and play. Sara's generosity and imagination made her beloved by some, envied by others, and occasionally resented by those who sought to control the social order. She organized small entertainments in the dormitory, reciting poetry, telling stories from India, and improvising little plays. Her creativity was unmatched, her warmth infectious. Yet she never flaunted her advantages. Her wealth was known, but Sara preferred to let kindness, intelligence, and humor define her, rather than jewels or silks. In the evenings, the girls gathered in the sitting room. Miss Minchin would preside, her expression severe, watching every movement, every gesture. The girls recited lessons, practiced manners, and performed musical pieces. Sara, with her quick mind and graceful fingers, excelled at the piano and the harp. She would play melodies her father had taught her, bringing soft, enchanted moments to the otherwise strict routine. Miss Minchin, though a trivative of the excellence, sometimes remarked on Sara's independence of spirit with thinly veiled disapproval. "A lady must not draw attention to herself," she would say. But Sara, obedient yet spirited, balanced compliance with subtle individuality, never losing her joy in the things she loved. Week after week, Sara settled into the rhythms of school life. She rose early, dressed neatly, and attended lessons with attentive curiosity. She joined the other girls in walks in the garden courtyard, where they practiced drawing and played quiet games. She learned the art of graceful living within boundaries, of creativity under constraint, and of kindness that required no recognition. She understood that true nobility lay not in riches or appearance, but in the heart, and she embodied this wisdom even amidst the rigid walls of Miss Minchin's school. Though the days passed in structured lessons, measured play, and evening recitations, Sara never lost the joy of discovery. She sketched, she sang, she read aloud, and she imagined worlds far beyond the courtyard. Her laughter rang clear in dormitories, corridors, and garden paths, a melody that softened the strict atmosphere of the seminary. Even the Even the most skeptical teachers could not deny her brilliance, nor the sense of hope and delight she brought to the lives of those around her. Yet, beneath the surface of her cheerful demeanor, Sara sensed the precariousness of her situation. Miss Minchin's sharp eyes and thinly veiled criticisms were constant reminders that wealth, manners, and talent were all measured against a rigid standard. Any misstep could bring censure, and any display of independence could provoke jealousy or punishment. Sara's heart was brave, but she knew that maintaining her dignity required careful attention, courage, and wisdom. She resolved silently that no challenge, no matter how strict or cruel, would diminish her spirit. She would endure, she would flourish, and she would continue to be the little princess in the hearts of those who mattered most. As weeks turned into months, Sara's life at Miss Minchin's school became a tapestry of small triumphs, friendships, rivalries, and lessons. She learned the art of graceful living within boundaries, of creativity under constraint, and of kindness that required no recognition. She discovered that the world was often divided into those who sought to dominate, those who sought to envy, and those who quietly helped and cherished. And in this delicate balance, Sara's heart found its strength, her mind its curiosity, and her soul its courage. Sara's story at Miss Minchin's seminary was just beginning, yet even in these early months, it was clear that her life would be defined not merely by wealth or social position, but by the courage, imagination, and unbreakable kindness that dwelled within her. She became a beacon of light in the stern halls, a gentle leader among her peers, and a source of quiet wonder to all who witnessed her grace. The days of study, of play, of careful manners, and of private reflection prepared her for the challenges ahead, shaping her into a young girl whose spirit could endure adversity and whose heart could never be diminished by cruelty or misfortune. And so, Sara Crewe, the little princess of India, began her life in London with courage, curiosity, and a heart wide open to the adventures, friendships, and lessons that lay ahead at Miss Minchin's Select Seminary for Young Ladies. The sun had barely risen over London when Sara Crewe awoke in her neat, modest room at Miss Minchin's seminary. A thin shaft of pale light fell across the wooden floor, touching her favorite doll and the little embroidery she had been working on. Usually, the mornings at the school were bustling with the sound of other girls preparing for lessons, but today, an unusual quiet had settled over the house, as though the building itself were holding its breath. Sara, curious and slightly uneasy, rose and dressed herself quickly. Downstairs, the common room was unusually empty. Only Miss Minchin herself stood at the fireplace, her stern face more rigid than usual. "Good morning, Sara," she said, without her usual warmth. "Come here a moment. I have some news for you." Sara's heart skipped a beat. She had been accustomed to Miss Minchin's small reprimands and sharp remarks, but this tone, this seriousness was different. "Yes, Miss Minchin?" she asked, softly, her small hands clasped in front of her. Miss Minchin motioned for Sara to sit. The older woman's eyes, usually sharp and calculating, softened for a moment, though they were still shadowed with concern. "It is about your father," she began, her voice steady but low. Sara's chest tightened. "You know how devoted he has always been to you, to your education, to your happiness. But—" she paused, searching for words. Sara felt the first twinge of fear. "But what?" she asked, her voice trembling. Miss Minchin cleared her throat and continued. "We have received word from India. Your father's regiment. There was an accident, a sudden attack. Several soldiers have been lost, and I'm afraid—" She stopped, letting the weight of the words sink in. Sara's mind spun. The room seemed to tilt, and she gripped the edge of her chair to steady herself. "My father, she whispered, almost unable to form the words. "Is he hurt?" Miss Minchin's lips pressed into a thin line. "Sara, I'm afraid he has passed away." The words hit Sara with the force of a storm. She felt her knees weaken and a sob escaped her lips. "No, no!" she cried, her small body trembling violently. She clutched her chest as though to keep her heart from breaking into pieces. Miss Minchin reached out, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I am very sorry, my dear child. I know how devoted you were to him. I will do all I can to help you through this." But words could not comfort Sara. Her father had been her whole world, her protector, her teacher, her friend, the one person who understood her imagination and curiosity. And now he was gone. She felt as though the light in her life had been snuffed out. For hours she wandered the empty schoolrooms and hallways, unable to settle. Her mind kept returning to memories of her father, his laughter echoing through the vast house in India, the gentle way he encouraged her to read stories aloud, the quiet evenings when he would let her sit beside him, talking endlessly about everything under the sun. And now all of it was gone. Miss Minchin, despite her outward strictness, allowed Sara some time to grieve. But she also knew the practicalities of life must continue, and soon the reality of Sara's situation began to press upon both of them. Her father had been immensely wealthy, and his passing had left his affairs in a state of uncertainty. Letters arrived and went unanswered, and every day Miss Minchin grew more concerned. "Miss Crewe," she said one morning, after a particularly restless night, "I have received a letter from your father's lawyer. He writes that your father's estate, the fortune, is not as secure as we had thought. There have been losses, investments gone awry, and the family home, the treasures, all of it may no longer be yours." Sara, pale and exhausted from nights of crying, could barely comprehend the news. "You mean we have nothing?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Miss Minchin nodded. "I am afraid so. Your father's passing has left you with very little. I will help you, of course, but the reality is, life will be different now." Sara felt her world collapse in layers around her. From the luxurious tales she had imagined in her dreams of continuing her father's lifestyle, she now faced the cruel truth that she was alone, impoverished, and without her beloved father. Her imagination, once her greatest comfort, seemed to mock her now, offering visions of happiness she could no longer claim. But even as the tears fell freely, Sara's innate strength, nurtured by her father's loving guidance, refused to let her be completely defeated. She remembered the stories he had read to her, the lessons about courage, dignity, and kindness. Even in grief, she resolved to carry herself with the same poise her father had always admired in her. As days passed, Sara's life at the school began to shift dramatically. The other girls at the school, who had once admired her wealth and the attention she drew, now regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. They whispered in corners, noting the change in her circumstances, and the subtle shift in Miss Minchin's treatment became evident. Sara, who had once been treated like a princess, was now spoken to as a child who must adjust to her new, uncertain position. "Miss Crewe," Miss Minchin said one afternoon, her voice cold now where it had once been concerned, "you must understand that your situation requires humility and adaptation. No longer can you expect the luxuries you once enjoyed. You must do as others do, without complaint." Sara nodded, swallowing her pride. Though it hurt, she knew her strength lay not in wealth, but in character. She resolved quietly to continue her studies and maintain her manners, even as she felt the sting of isolation and sorrow. One day, a letter arrived from India, carried by a solemn messenger. Sara tore it open with trembling hands. It was from her father's business associate, a man she had never met, explaining further the state of her father's affairs. The letter was formal and devoid of emotion, but the message was clear. Sara Crewe's fortune was gone. There would be no inheritance, no safety net. Sara sat for hours staring at the letter, trying to summon the courage that her father had always expected of her. And in the quiet of the evening, she did something remarkable. She began to write. First, a letter to her father. Though she knew he could not read it, the act of writing allowed her to speak to him, to release her grief in a way words aloud never could. Dear Papa, I miss you more than words can say. I am so frightened, but I will try to be brave, as you always taught me. I will not let the world see me fall apart, though I'm so sad. Please watch over me, Papa. Guide me, as you always have. Afterward, she pressed the letter to her chest and allowed herself a moment to cry. Then she carefully folded it and placed it in her drawer, a private testament to her love and loyalty. Despite her grief, life at the school continued its relentless pace. Lessons went on, meals were served, and the other girls, some sympathetic but many jealous, observed her struggle with quiet fascination. Sara's loneliness deepened as her peers began to distance themselves, unsure how to interact with a girl who had gone from wealth to poverty almost overnight. But through it all, Sara's imagination remained her refuge. She would spend hours lost in the stories her father had loved, tales of distant lands, brave heroines, and wondrous adventures, drawing strength and comfort from them. Miss Minchin, despite her outward strictness, grew both frustrated and wary. The girl's resilience was unexpected, and though she now had control over Sara's diminished circumstances, she found it impossible to crush the spark of dignity and intelligence that her pupil still carried. Miss Minchin's attempts at intimidation, whether through harsher rules or cold treatment, were met with quiet endurance and clever resistance. Sara adapted, learned to obey without bitterness, and even found ways to support the other girls with her kindness, despite her own suffering. But sorrow has a way of seeping into every corner of life, and Sara's nights were haunted by dreams of India, of her father's smile, and of the secure, loving world that had been torn from her. She often imagined herself wandering the empty corridors of the house she would never own, calling out for him, only to be met with silence. Each morning she awoke with the ache still in her chest, yet determined to face the day with courage. It was during such a morning that Sara, in the midst of her lessons, suddenly received the news of another shock. A second letter, this one more official, confirmed that her father's investments had completely failed. All of the treasures, all of the plans for her future, vanished as if they had never existed. Even the teachers at the school, who had once admired her as Miss Crewe, the little princess, now treated her as nothing more than a quiet, obedient girl to be managed. Sara's eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry aloud. She understood, even at her tender age, that life could be cruel. But she also knew that grief, though powerful, could not define her. She would hold on to the lessons her father had taught her, the importance of imagination, kindness, and strength in adversity, and she would survive, no matter the circumstances. Miss Minchin, realizing that her control over Sara was now absolute, began to impose stricter routines and expectations. Sara's days became filled with chores she had never imagined, in addition to her studies. She cleaned, polished, and organized, all while maintaining her composure, a feat that earned her both admiration and resentment among the other girls. Yet in her heart, Sara remained untouchable. The love of her father, the memory of his gentle encouragement, and the inner world he had nurtured in her gave her a strength that no misfortune could destroy. Though the world outside seemed harsh and unyielding, Sara Crewe had learned, even at the age of 10, that true wealth lay not in money or possessions, but in courage, imagination, and the unbreakable bonds of love. As the weeks passed, Sara's grief began to transform. It became a quiet determination, a resolve to live as her father would have wished, with dignity and grace. She was no longer just the little girl who had lost her father and her fortune. She was Sara Crewe, a young girl who had faced tragedy and found a way to continue, carrying the light of hope within her heart. And though the future was uncertain, she faced it with courage, for she knew that life, no matter how cruel, also held moments of beauty, and that the spirit of a little princess could never truly be taken away. Sara's hardships in the attic. The sun had barely risen when Sara awoke in her small, dimly lit attic room. The cold air bit at her cheeks, and the wind howled through the cracks in the roof. Her once bright eyes now held a quiet sorrow, and the golden curls that had been her pride were tangled and dull. Gone were the days of warmth and comfort, of silk dresses and elegant meals. Here, in the shadowy upper chamber of Miss Minchin's school, life had become a daily test of endurance. Sara looked around the attic, taking in the sparse furnishings. A narrow bed with a thin mattress leaned against one wall, and the single grimy window offered only a bleak view of the rooftops below. The floorboards creaked under her feet, and dust covered every surface. Yet, even in this desolate room, Sara tried to summon her imagination. She whispered to herself, as she often did, "Even here, even now, I can find a little magic." Her first task of the day was to fetch water from the cold stone basin in the kitchen below. Each step she took down the winding staircase reminded her of the humiliation she had faced the day before, when Miss Minchin, cruel and unyielding, had declared that Sara was no longer to be treated as a lady. Now she was a servant, stripped of privilege, forced to wear ragged clothing and perform chores beyond her years. The kitchen was already busy with the bustling of other servants. Sara's heart sank at the sight of Miss Minchin's watchful eyes, sharp as ever. The headmistress had stationed herself near the door as though ready to pounce on any sign of weakness or disobedience. "Make haste, Miss Crewe," Miss Minchin called, her voice cold. "We have no time for your dawdling." Sara lowered her eyes and nodded silently. She carried the heavy pail to the water pump outside, her small hands gripping the rough handle. The cold water splashed over her fingers, numbing them instantly, but she endured the discomfort silently, thinking only of her father. She remembered the tales he used to tell her, of faraway lands, of treasures and adventures, and she promised herself she would survive this hardship, no matter how cruel or relentless. Back in the attic, Sara's first chore was to clean the room herself. She swept the dusty floorboards, arranged the few belongings she was allowed to keep, and made her bed with trembling hands. Every motion was slow, careful, and precise, as if by perfecting these small tasks, she could maintain some semblance of control over her world. Yet despite her efforts, the loneliness pressed upon her like a heavy cloak. The laughter of the other girls echoed faintly from below, mocking her absence from their daily games and lessons. Even Ermengarde, once a friend, now seemed distant, hesitant to approach the girl who had fallen from grace. She missed the companionship she had known, the easy warmth of friendships built on shared joys rather than duty. At lunchtime, Sara ate the cold scraps of bread and thin soup served to her in silence. She watched the other girls dine in the main hall, their faces bright and free from the weight she now carried. She tried to recall the voices of her friends, their smiles, their gentle teasing. Yet the memories seemed as distant as the stars she sometimes wished upon at night, a comforting illusion she could barely touch. The afternoons were the most challenging. Miss Minchin imposed an endless list of chores, scrubbing floors, dusting furniture, sewing and mending torn clothing, running errands in the bitter wind. Often she felt as though her hands would blister, her back would ache beyond repair, yet she endured without complaint. Every task completed was a small victory, a reminder that she could maintain her dignity even when the world around her sought to strip it away. On one particularly cold evening, Sara sat by the fireplace in the attic, shivering under a thin blanket. The moonlight illuminated her pale face, casting long shadows across the room. She pulled out a small, tattered book she had saved from her more comfortable days, tracing the words with her fingers. Although the pages were worn and the cover frayed, the stories within offered her solace. She read aloud softly, her voice echoing in the empty room, imagining herself as the brave heroine of each tale. "Even in darkness," she whispered to herself, "I can be strong." Her resolve was tested again when Becky, the youngest servant girl at the school, was sent to assist her with her chores. Becky was timid, shy, and easily frightened by Miss Minchin's stern presence. Sara, though weary, took on a protective role, guiding Becky gently and quietly. Together, they worked in silence, each aware of the other's struggles. In those fleeting moments, Sara felt a spark of connection, a reminder that even in hardship, kindness could endure. Days passed into weeks, and Sara's life in the attic became a routine of survival. She learned to find small joys, the delicate pattern of frost on the window in the morning, the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread from the kitchen, the soft murmur of the wind that seemed to carry her father's voice. She imagined herself in faraway places, building gardens in the clouds, wandering through enchanted forests, and meeting people whose hearts were gentle and true. Despite her imagination and resilience, the physical hardships took their toll. Sara's thin hands became calloused from constant work. Her face lost its rosy glow, and her once elegant dresses were replaced by coarse, patched clothing. Yet she refused to let despair settle in her heart. She clung to the hope that her father's fortune, or some miracle, might restore her to her former life. Until then, she would endure. One evening, as Sara was arranging the few possessions she still had in the attic, she heard a soft knock at the door. Startled, she opened it cautiously, to find Becky peeking nervously. "Miss Sara?" she whispered. "There's something I want to show you, something special." Sara's curiosity was piqued. She followed Becky down the narrow stairs to the far corner of the school grounds. There, hidden behind a stack of crates and old gardening tools, was a small, neglected patch of soil. Sara's eyes widened. Though barren and overgrown with weeds, she saw the potential for beauty. With Becky's help, Sara began to tend to the small garden. She cleared the weeds, dug the soil, and planted the few seeds she had found hidden in a corner of the school. Each day, after completing her chores, she would return to the garden, watering and caring for the tiny plants with unwavering dedication. The work was hard, and the soil was unyielding, but she found comfort in nurturing life where none seemed possible. The garden became Sara's sanctuary. It was her secret world, a place where she could breathe freely, dream, and remember her father's words about the wonders of life. Even as Miss Minchin's eyes glared upon her from afar, Sara felt a quiet triumph. She had carved out a space of hope and beauty in a world determined to crush her spirit. Through these small acts of resilience, Sara grew stronger. She learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. She discovered that kindness and compassion could survive even in the harshest conditions. And she realized that her imagination, her ability to dream, was a power no one could take from her. Weeks turned into months, and the seasons began to change. Snow covered the rooftops and the garden, and Sara would sit by the attic window, tracing patterns in the frost with her finger, imagining flowers blooming beneath the snow. The hardships continued, yet she faced each day with quiet determination and grace. Even in the darkest moments, Sara never lost her sense of wonder. She befriended the animals that wandered near the school, finding comfort in their presence. She wrote letters to her father in her heart, imagining him receiving them across the seas. And she nurtured a dream that one day the cruel world of Miss Minchin's school would be behind her, and she would once again be free to live, to explore, and to be the little princess she knew herself to be. One particularly harsh winter evening, Sara sat by the fireplace in the attic, the wind howling outside. Becky, curled up near the hearth, shivered under a thin blanket. Sara pulled her own cloak tighter around her shoulders and whispered, "We will endure, Becky. One day things will be better. We just have to hold on." And so, amidst the cold, the loneliness, and the relentless chores, Sara's spirit remained unbroken. She faced each day with courage, imagination, and a quiet dignity that Miss Minchin could never take away. The mysterious help and Ramdas. The attic seemed colder than ever that morning. The thin sliver of light that fell through the grimy window offered little comfort to Sara, who sat hunched over her small bundle of belongings. Her face, pale from countless nights of worry and hunger, reflected a steadfast resilience that had not dimmed even in the harshest days. She had long since stopped hoping for kindness from Miss Minchin or sympathy from the other girls. The world, it seemed, had forsaken her. Yet in the deepest corners of her heart there remained a fragile flame of hope, small, almost imperceptible, yet stubbornly persistent. She wrapped her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders and closed her eyes, imagining her father's warm smile and the gentle sound of his voice. Memories of happier times in India, of sun-drenched gardens and fragrant flowers, fluttered before her eyes like butterflies, urging her to endure, to keep believing in something better. Sara had learned to move quietly, to avoid the sharp eyes of the servants who might scold her for attempting even the smallest comfort. She ate what little she could find in the kitchen scraps Miss Minchin begrudgingly allowed her, often going to bed hungry. The nights were the hardest. The attic, once a place of curiosity and daydreams, had become a prison. Yet tonight, Sara felt a restless stirring inside her, a sense that someone was near, something that might change her world. It began with a soft sound outside her window, a gentle tap, almost like a knock. Sara froze, straining her ears. Could it be a mouse, or the wind shifting the loose shutters? The tapping came again, deliberate this time, almost rhythmic. She hesitated, but pressed her small hands to the cold glass. Peering out, she was startled to see a figure standing below, a tall man with dark skin and a long turban, his eyes kind and intelligent, yet shadowed with a weight of experience. Sara's first instinct was fear. Who could it be at this hour? But the figure only smiled gently, holding out a small basket. She could not hear his voice, yet some unspoken reassurance seemed to emanate from him. With careful movements, she opened the window just a fraction, enough to allow the basket to be handed up. Inside were simple foods, fresh bread, a few fruits, and a small bottle of milk. She gasped softly. Who could know she had gone without so long? The man nodded, as if to say he understood her plight. Then he spoke, his voice calm, measured, and filled with a gentle authority. "Little princess," he said, the words foreign but understandable, "fear not, you are not forgotten." Sara's eyes widened. Who are you?" she whispered, almost too softly to be heard. "I am a friend sent by one who cares for you." Before Sara could ask more, he stepped back, disappearing into the shadows of the courtyard. Sara clutched the basket to her chest, a mixture of awe, relief, and curiosity washing over her. Who would help her in this way, and why now, when all hope seemed lost? The days that followed were a mixture of wonder and caution. Each morning, without fail, a small basket would appear outside her window, filled with food and occasionally small gifts, a book, a piece of cloth, a ribbon. Sara's spirits, though fragile, began to lift. She found herself smiling more, her imagination rekindled, her heart daring to hope again. Yet she was careful. She did not want Miss Minchin to discover her mysterious benefactor, for she knew the headmistress's wrath would be severe. One afternoon, as Sara lingered in the garden behind the school, an area neglected and overgrown, she was startled by the same tall figure she had seen at her window. This time he spoke more at length. "You are brave, little one," he said, "braver than many grown people I have known. But you must not face the world entirely alone. Help comes in many forms, though sometimes it is hidden." Sara's curiosity overcame her shyness. "Are you sent by my father?" she asked, clutching her shawl tightly. The man's expression softened, and he shook his head. "I do not serve your father, child, but I serve his wishes. He always believed in your goodness, your courage. Even if he is far from here, even if he cannot protect you now, he would want someone to guide and care for you." Sara's lump rose in her throat. Her father. She had thought of him constantly, praying for news that never came. Could this stranger truly be acting on his behalf? "My name is Ram Das," he continued, sensing her need for explanation. "I am a friend. I am here to help." Ram Das's presence was like a balm on Sara's wounded spirit. There was authority in him, but also kindness, a combination rare and comforting. He taught her small things to protect herself, to find safety, and to keep her hope alive even amidst neglect. More than that, he listened to her stories of India, of her father, of her imagined adventures, and he never interrupted or dismissed her fantasies. In his company, Sara felt seen, not as a pauper, but as a person of value, capable of resilience and deserving of care. Weeks passed, and Sara's routine subtly changed. She still endured the cold nights and the harsh words of Miss Minchin, but the baskets and Ram Das's secret visits became lifelines. One day, when the sky was painted in shades of gold and crimson, Ram Das appeared with a serious expression. "Little princess, the time has come for you to prepare for something important." Sara's heart raced. "Important? What is it?" He smiled gently. "It is time you understand that kindness exists even in the shadows, that you are not alone, and that the world, though sometimes cruel, can also be gentle. I have a plan that will change your circumstances, but it will require courage and trust." Sara nodded solemnly. She had learned long ago that courage was not the absence of fear, but the strength to persevere despite it. Over the following days, Ram Das instructed Sara in practical matters. He taught her to read letters, to count money, and even to write small messages. These skills were small in themselves, but to Sara they were keys to independence, symbols of empowerment that Miss Minchin had denied her. He also encouraged her to cultivate her imagination, to paint pictures in her mind of beauty and adventure, reminding her that no one could take away the treasures of her mind. One rainy afternoon, as the clouds hung heavy over the city, Ram Dass appeared once more, holding a small leather-bound notebook. "This," he said, "is for your thoughts, your stories, your dreams. Fill it with everything you imagine, everything you hope for. No one can take it from you." Sara clutched the notebook to her chest, tears welling in her eyes. For the first time in months, she felt a deep sense of safety. Someone, at last, was on her side, not because she was wealthy or accomplished, but simply because she was deserving of kindness. But the mystery of her benefactor still lingered. Who else knew of her plight? Why had Ram Dass come at this particular time? Sara asked these questions tentatively, her young mind grappling with the complexities of human kindness and secrecy. "Some things, little princess, are not meant to be understood immediately," Ram Dass said with a gentle smile. "Sometimes it is enough to accept help and let it guide you." As weeks turned into months, Sara's confidence grew. She began to speak more boldly, to defend herself quietly against Miss Minchin's scorn, and to comfort the few friends she had, like Becky, who shared in the hardships of the attic. Ram Dass continued to visit, always discreetly, always offering guidance, until Sara felt a profound shift within herself. She was no longer merely surviving, she was learning to thrive, to hope, and to dream again. One day, Ram Dass brought news that startled Sara more than any hardship ever had. "Your father, he is not lost," he said, his eyes twinkling with a mixture of relief and caution. "There are people working to locate him. There is a path forward, but you must remain strong and patient." Sara's heart leapt. The thought that her father might still live, that the dreams of reunion might not be mere fantasy, filled her with renewed determination. She threw her arms around Ram Dass, hugging him tightly, feeling the warmth of human connection that had been absent for so long. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling, "for everything, for not letting me give up." Ram Dass placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "No, little princess, the strength was always yours. I only helped you remember it." As Sara returned to the attic that evening, clutching her notebook and the memory of Ram Dass's words, she felt a deep sense of hope. The darkness had not vanished entirely, but she had discovered that even in the harshest circumstances, light could enter through the smallest of openings, and sometimes that light came in the form of unexpected allies, mysterious friends, and unwavering faith. For the first time in many long weeks, Sara allowed herself to dream freely, to imagine a future where her father's love was not a memory, but a living reality, and where kindness and courage could triumph over cruelty and neglect. And in the quiet of the attic, Sara's heart began to shine once more, lighting the way toward the eventual reunion, the restoration of her family, and the happiness she had long dreamed of but dared not yet fully imagine. The coming days would bring challenges still, but Sara felt ready. With Ram Dass's guidance, her unwavering imagination, and the rekindled hope in her heart, she was no longer a lonely, powerless girl. She was a little princess, not by wealth or title, but by spirit and resilience, qualities that no misfortune could diminish. And so, amidst the shadows of the attic, Sara's heart began to shine once more, lighting the way toward the eventual reunion, the restoration of her family, and the happiness she had long dreamed of, but dared not yet fully imagine. The first light of dawn crept softly through the attic window, brushing Sara Lennox's pale, weary face with its golden warmth. For the first time in months, a gentle calmness seemed to settle around her small, lonely room. The room itself was still sparse and dusty. the shadows of old furniture stretching across the walls like lingering memories. But Sara's heart felt lighter than it had in countless weeks. She had endured so much, yet now there was hope, a whisper of change dancing in the air. Outside, the morning carried the sounds of London waking. Horses clattered on the cobbled streets, and the faint cry of a street vendor mingled with the distant toll of a church bell. Sara sat on her small mattress, her greenish-gray eyes reflecting the light with a quiet strength that had grown through hardship and sorrow. She thought of Ram Das, the gentle servant who had appeared when she least expected help, and of the kind strangers who had secretly eased her suffering. But there was one figure she longed for above all, her father. Sara pressed her small hands together and whispered a silent prayer. Please let him be safe. Please let him return. Her voice was soft, almost swallowed by the morning light, yet it carried with it a resilience that had never been absent, even when her world seemed utterly lost. Suddenly, a knock sounded at the attic door, tentative and gentle. Sara's heart leapt. She had grown accustomed to being ignored, to living in the shadows of Miss Minchin's cruelty, and even a small knock could fill her with hope. "Who is it?" she asked softly, her voice both timid and eager. It's me, Miss Sara," said a familiar voice. It was Ram Das, his tone careful, almost afraid of startling her. "May I come in?" "Yes, oh please do," Sara exclaimed, rushing to open the door. Ram Das entered, carrying a small bundle of letters and parcels. His eyes were kind, but they held a seriousness that made Sara's stomach flutter nervously. "I have news," he said slowly. "Good news, Miss Sara." Sara's heart thumped wildly. "News? About my father?" she asked, clutching his sleeve. Ram Das nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. "Yes, your father, he is well, Miss Sara. He has returned to London." For a moment, Sara could not believe her ears. Her mind spun as the words sank in. She had imagined this moment countless times, dreamed of it with every tear and every lonely night, and now it was true. "Returned? Really?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and joy. "Yes," Ram Das said, carefully placing the letters on a small table. "And there is more. Your father has been searching for you ever since he learned of your hardships. He wishes to see you immediately." Sara felt a rush of emotion that nearly overcame her. She sank to her knees, tears spilling freely. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she laughed through her tears, a sound so bright and pure it seemed to fill the dusty attic with light. "Oh, Ram Das, oh, thank you, she cried. Ram Das gently lifted her to her feet. "You must prepare yourself, Miss Sara. Your father is waiting, and he will wish to embrace you at once." Sara hurried to tidy her small room as best she could, brushing away the dust from her mattress and smoothing the folds of her worn dress. Though her clothing was humble, Sara's dignity and courage shone through. She brushed back her light blonde hair and looked into the small mirror on the wall. The girl who stared back was tired, yes, but there was a quiet radiance in her greenish-gray eyes that spoke of resilience, hope, and an unbroken spirit. Downstairs, the world seemed impossibly large and overwhelming, but Sara barely noticed. She followed Ram Das through the hallways and into the street where a carriage awaited. Its polished wood gleamed in the morning sun, and the horses pawed impatiently at the cobblestones. Sara climbed inside, her heart racing. She could feel her father's presence, not yet seen, but somehow palpable. The carriage moved through the streets with a gentle rhythm, each turn bringing Sara closer to the moment she had longed for. She looked out the window at the city she had known only as a place of confinement and harsh lessons,
and now it seemed transformed, alive with possibility and hope. The familiar sights of London no longer seemed frightening or oppressive. They were the prelude to a miracle she could scarcely believe. At last, the carriage came to a halt in front of a modest but elegant townhouse. Sara stepped out, her small hand clutching Ram Dass's for reassurance. She saw a man waiting at the doorway, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. Her father, Colonel Carrisford, looked older than she remembered, his face lined with the weight of worry and loss. Yet his eyes were the same, warm and tender, filled with love that had not dimmed with absence. He took a hesitant step forward, as if afraid she might vanish like a dream. "Sara," he whispered, his voice breaking. Sara ran to him, and in an instant they were in each other's arms. The world outside ceased to exist. The months of loneliness, the struggles in the attic, the fear, the cold nights, the cruel taunts of Miss Minchin, all of it melted away in the warmth of her father's embrace. "Oh, Papa, I have missed you so," Sara cried, burying her face in his shoulder. "And I you, my precious child," Colonel Carrisford murmured, holding her close. "Not a moment passed without my thinking of you, my little princess." They stood together in silence for a long while, each holding the other as if to make up for all the lost time. Sara felt tears on her cheeks, but they were tears of joy, of relief, of reunion long awaited. At last they pulled back slightly, holding hands, faces alight with smiles. "Come inside, Sara," her father said. "There is much to tell you, and so many things to make up for." Inside the townhouse, warmth and light embraced Sara. The rooms were modest but filled with comfort, a stark contrast to the cold, lonely attic she had endured. There were books and toys, fresh linens and fragrant flowers. Every detail seemed to whisper, "You belong here. You are safe now." Over tea, Colonel Carrisford recounted the months of his search. He spoke of travels, of letters lost and found, of friends and loyal servants who had aided him. Sara listened, eyes wide, heart full. She realized how much had changed, how much kindness existed even amidst hardship, and how the world could still be a place of wonder when one had love and courage. "And Miss Minchin?" Sara asked quietly, remembering the woman who had shown her cruelty. Colonel Carrisford shook his head, a shadow crossing his face. "She has been dismissed from her school. No one shall endure her tyranny again, and you, my child, will never know fear in her halls again." Sara smiled faintly, relief flooding through her. The past would always be a memory, but now it was distant, softened by the joy of reunion. Days passed in a whirl of happiness. Sara reveled in her father's company, exploring the gardens, reading books together, and sharing laughter that seemed too bright to be real after so much sorrow. Ram Dass became a constant presence, a gentle reminder of the friends who had stood by her in the darkest times. And soon Sara found herself venturing outside the city with her father, discovering the beauty of the English countryside. The air was fresh, the grass soft underfoot, and every tree and flower seemed alive with possibility. One crisp afternoon, while walking along a sunlit path, Sara noticed a small figure approaching from the distance. It was Becky, the kind-hearted servant girl from the school who had endured hardships alongside her. Becky's face brightened when she saw Sara, and she ran forward, throwing her arms around her friend. "Oh, Miss Sara, I thought I would never see you happy again," Becky cried, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. "You're here! Oh, Becky, I've missed you so!" Sara exclaimed, hugging her tightly. The bond between them, forged in adversity, had only grown stronger with time. Together they returned to the townhouse, where Colonel Carrisford welcomed Becky warmly, offering her a place in their household. Sara realized with a full heart that happiness was not just found in reunion with her father, but also in friendship, kindness, and the compassion of those who loved her even when she had nothing to give in return. Weeks turned into months, and Sara's life blossomed like the gardens she now explored daily. The little girl who had once suffered so greatly had grown into a young lady of strength, grace, and boundless kindness. Her heart remained open, her imagination vibrant, and her spirit unbroken. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Sara sat with her father in the garden. She looked up at him, eyes reflecting the fading light, and said softly, "Papa, I have learned so much about courage, about hope, and about love. And I will never forget the friends who helped me along the way." Colonel Carrisford smiled, his eyes glistening. "And that, my dear Sara, is the true magic of life. It is love, courage, and kindness that endure, even when the world seems harsh. You have carried it all within you, and it has guided you home." Sara leaned back against the soft grass, her heart full and serene. Around her the garden bloomed, the birds sang, and the world seemed perfectly at peace. At that moment, nothing else mattered. The long months of sorrow had ended, replaced by a life full of promise, warmth, and endless love. And so, Sara Lennox, the little princess who had endured so much, found her happy ending, not just in the reunion with her father, but in the knowledge that love, courage, and kindness could conquer even the darkest of times. The city lights of London glimmered in the distance, the wind whispered softly through the garden, and for Sara, every tomorrow promised joy, hope, and the kind of peace that comes only after a storm has passed. Her story, once filled with sorrow, had blossomed into one of wonder and delight, a story of a little princess who had truly discovered the meaning of home.